Kingdom Come is my favorite comic.
All right, Virgin, get on the target.
Not just my favorite comic, but the comic that got me into comic books. Kingdom Come is just a really good intro for those who know these characters, but never really picked up a comic book. A chef's kiss that not only embodies the ending of the 90s for comics, but also the changing of the guard. I guess the best way to really explain this is to break down some history. Let me paint you a picture. It's the 90s. The 80s led to comics becoming a more collectible market in the mainstream. Since some of the older comics that didn't get thrown out were getting sold at ridiculous prices, it led to a bubble of non-collectors and non-comic readers buying into the market. Publishers happy to exploit this started to print variants, messing with storylines for gimmick issues, and a lot of series being relaunched as series number 1.
Which was the style at the time?
This horrible mismanagement led to talent leaving Marvel and starting indie studios such as Image Comics. With these younger artists and the loosening of the publishing, this meant that they were free to publish more intense, violent, and adult stories.
Honestly, Hank, where do you pick that stuff up?
Stories that would bend the rules of heroes and make us question the old ways. Of course, with all this new air in the market, DC and Marvel followed up with more edgier stories from mainline characters. This led to the 90s gaining the perception of edgy, but not all talent had isolated themselves at one publication. Alex Ross and Kurt Busiek started releasing Astro City with Image Comics. Alex, who did the covers, Kurt the writing, and all drawn by Brent Anderson with amazing artwork, would create a comic about a city of heroes with a story following ordinary people. No doubt an inspiration for their next work, Marvels. Marvels, a comic drawn by Alex Ross and again written by Kurt Busiek, as a love letter to the gold and silver age of comics. It would also use the same sort of background as Astro City, but instead of using heroes of Kurt's creation, it uses the Marvel release timeline as the order of characters introduced, and follows a single person in the narrative. Through Alex Ross's amazing painting style, recreating iconic Marvel moments, this love letter follows Sheldon, a photographer who is trying to strike it big, along with a young J. Jonah in New York at the start of the Second World War. Sheldon tries to get overseas to photograph the war, but is stopped by the introduction of the Marvels. This leads to Sheldon being confused about what this means for the world and humanity as a whole. As the heroes we know start fighting World War II and more Marvels join the city, Sheldon becomes enthralled with them and starts to write a book called Marvels. I don't want to spoil the rest of it, but you should read Marvels.
Fuck you.
With Alex's run of Marvels, he started to write a story in a similar vein for DC, Kingdom Come. Kingdom Come, in my opinion, is a great place to start for non-comic reading comic fans of DC to learn the legacy characters. You ever want to start reading comics, but are just overwhelmed by the choices and stories, or like want something short and not multiple issues?
Well, look harder, fuckface.
With a plot that's relatively short, this comic's got you covered. I'll get more into the plot in a moment, but let me talk about the presentation. The art in this comic, in short, is beautiful, painterly, and just a whole experience really. It's like you could take any panel and put it in a frame and bullshit about higher art. Its use of colors and just how photorealistic it is just goes to show you why Alex Ross is always asked to do some cover art. This is all in service to a story about a man losing faith and an apocalypse coming. It is almost biblical how all of it feels, like reading from the beginning gives you this feeling a natural disaster is coming. The story follows a priest losing his faith amidst a change in the hero's culture and morals. Superman is gone, and Magog is leading these new heroes on a bloody campaign, Citizens Be Damned. As the priest prays in his church, the Spectre comes to ask for his aid to make sense of the coming events and judge humanity. As they move around the narrative, Superman comes from retirement and is thrust into a geopolitical situation where the heroes of old are saving the world from the younger ones. He is asked who gives him the authority to capture and reform these heroes.
You think you're hot in a champagne glass, but you're really cold diarrhea in a Dixie cup. And if you keep up like you've been doing, this is where you're headed. Well, that's funny to you, right? Because you're so fucking bad. I know your type. You think I'll just get me a costume, rip off the neighborhood kids. Next thing you know, you've got a jet shaped like a skull with lasers on the front.
You see what they're doing, right? They've put the new generation of comics as the narrative. These younger heroes who are being more violent and lacking morals, that's Image and a lot of the newer characters being introduced, while not having to reintroduce older heroes such as Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman.
Princess, you're gorgeous.
I cannot describe the galaxy brain moment I had looking at some of the designs of the younger heroes where they were taking cues from a lot of the 90s Edge comics. It's the Bronze to Silver Age against the New Age, and it's all unstable and unsure. I really don't want to ruin the rest of the plot, because I'd want you all to read it. So let me instead explain why the plot is a good starting point for non-comic readers. For starters, it's how they treat the reader with legacy characters. For example, when you're introduced to Batman, he's not seen. You instead see what Gotham has become in his old age. With the visuals, you already know it's Gotham, and even with the robots, you know who they work for. And even then, when you're finally shown Bruce, he's old and damaged from his years of Batman. They don't even need to tell you the whole time who that is and what his backstory is, you already know. I will admit, there are times when you do see some legacy characters, and they don't immediately click. Either because A, they've changed so much in the modern age you wouldn't recognize them, and B, maybe my idea who's the mainstream may be off. But in the flow of the plot, you don't need to recognize everyone, just the major league characters, which is why I feel it still holds as a solid start to reading the DC universe. This is all cemented by the fact that other stories have been implied to have happened, but are not required reading, as well as just some twists in the story benefiting from no knowledge at all. Since it's all contained in its own small story, you're not shoehorned into the next. Obviously, there are better entry stories that focus more on one characters, such as All-Star Superman and Batman's Hush. But see, I think this is good for an entry-level story because it shows two of DC's strengths as a universe. 1. How out there some of the side stories get. That's not to say Marvel isn't willing to get weird, but I always feel like DC is always willing to get weirder, and always trying something new with its side stuff, while Marvel is dealing with its current canon. And 2. DC's history. Marvel is full of wonderful history, but I feel like we've seen most of it or it's always used. Where with DC, you can bring in so much of the legacy stuff as a publisher has bought so many of the Pulp Fictions back in the day, they're not shying away from using them as new characters. A good example is Alan Scott, who is the original Green Lantern to be released in 1940, but later became the canon first Green Lantern in some continuities instead of Hal Jordan. Kingdom Come and its predecessor Marvels are just great stories and just great entry-level comics to get those who love MCU and DC movies to really get started in knowing and reading about the legacy of some of their favorite characters. Admittedly, there are probably better comic shorts that fit all what I'm saying, such as Batman Year One,
Dead parents.
or Flashpoint. However, in some entry lists, they also list Red Sun, which is in DC in the same boat as Kingdom Come in terms of continuity, meaning they both fall in separate universes called Elseworld. They all call their alternate universes Elseworld, by the way. So I don't think it's unreasonable to put Kingdom Come as an entry-level DC story. So if you're like me and love the history of something like comics and need some DC in your life, I'd recommend Kingdom Come.
Join me!
I'm Soren Thorin. Thank you for watching. I just wanted to say sorry I didn't get into Astro City or Marvels more deeply. I'm also kind of new to this, so I just wanted to put that out there. Thanks again for watching and putting your time out there. Really appreciate it. I hope you're having a wonderful day and, keeps going. I might make a video on Marvel and Astro City later, just thinking about it. But again, thank you for listening to my rant. I'm Soren Thorin.